Prince William was only moments away from entering one of the most important crown briefings of the year when he noticed a face that was never supposed to be there. Standing behind a restricted backstage door was Queen Camilla's son, Tom Parker Bowles. William stopped, stared, and asked one question that silenced the entire corridor. Seconds later, the future king canceled the briefing completely, and the reason behind that decision threatened to expose a deeper struggle inside the monarchy. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William held his place as advisors gathered behind him, waiting for the doors to open. The Crown Briefing, a private strategy meeting used to discuss royal duties, succession plans, security, and the future role of the heir, had been arranged with strict limits. King Charles was expected to attend with constitutional advisors and trusted officials. Camilla would join the opening discussion, then leave before the most sensitive matters began. Tom had no official palace role, no place on the approved list, and no reason to be standing beside the secured entrance. The prince did not raise his voice. That made the silence worse. He turned toward the senior equerry and asked who had authorized the access. No answer came. William looked from the officer to the closed door, and his expression hardened as he realized that everyone present understood the question, but no one wanted to own the answer. Camilla stepped forward and insisted her son's presence was harmless. The queen consort said he had come for a matter and had never intended to enter the meeting. William refused to move. He told her that family familiarity could not cross into confidential crown business, because one broken boundary could weaken every protection around the monarchy. An aide spoke. Tom had not used the main checkpoint. Someone had cleared a private corridor and sent him directly backstage. The admission changed everything. William then noticed a sealed briefing folder resting on a table, close enough to deepen suspicion even though it had not been opened. He placed his folder beside it, removed his glasses, and said, "This meeting does not proceed until I know who opened that door." The equerry lowered his eyes. Camilla's expression hardened. Tom remained still as the corridor emptied around him. Charles stayed behind after the advisors were escorted away. The king looked at his wife, then at her son, and demanded an explanation. But the cancelled briefing was only the visible explosion. Beneath it stood three people whose loyalties, fears, and competing ideas of the crown had been colliding for far longer. To the public, the confrontation appeared to be about security and protocol. Inside the palace, it was painfully personal. William saw the crown as a duty that demanded hard boundaries. Camilla saw a son who had spent years standing outside the institution that had transformed his mother's life. And Tom found himself trapped between two worlds, close enough to witness royal power, yet never entitled to touch it. That fragile balance was now breaking in full view of the king. William had spent years preparing for the burden waiting ahead. The crown was not simply a symbol of rank or privilege. It was the institution built around the sovereign, the heir, and the strict rules protecting royal authority from private influence. As Prince of Wales, the title traditionally held by the person first in line to the throne, he believed even a small breach could grow into a dangerous precedent. Tom Parker Bowles understood that distance better than most. Camilla's eldest son had attended weddings, family lunches, and private celebrations. Yet he held no constitutional role and carried no official power. He could stand beside royalty as family, but he could never speak or act for the monarchy. That difference had always existed. Now it had become impossible to ignore. William felt the backstage appearance had weakened his authority before the briefing even began. If one unofficial relative could be placed beside a confidential meeting without explanation, others might later claim the same access. The future king feared more than embarrassment. He feared a palace where personal relationships slowly became unofficial channels of power. Camilla felt something very different. She entered a private side room with Charles and removed one glove finger by finger, struggling to control her anger. "He was not trying to take anything from William," she said. The Queen Consort believed her son had been treated like an intruder, not as a man caught inside a decision he had not made. Charles looked toward the closed door and answered quietly, "Then someone has placed him where he never should have been." The king understood his heir's concern, but he also saw the pain behind his wife's defense. He sat between duty and family, exhausted by the knowledge that protecting one could wound the other. Tom finally admitted to Camilla that his arrival had not been accidental. A direct message had given him the exact time, entrance, and waiting point. She asked to see it, then went silent after reading the sender's name. Charles noticed her hesitation immediately. She refused to explain who had sent the instruction, and that silence pointed toward someone with access to her private office, the small team managing her schedule, correspondence, and official arrangements. William had already requested the Backstage access log. One name was missing from it. And to understand why that absence disturbed him so deeply, the palace would have to return to the private incident that first convinced him Tom's access was no longer accidental. The Crown briefing was not the beginning of the crisis. 3 months earlier, during a private dinner at Clarence House, a conversation had crossed a line William never forgot. What began as an informal family gathering ended with Tom speaking about royal plans he should never have known existed. The room fell silent. Camilla tried to redirect the discussion. Charles said nothing, and William left with a chilling certainty. Confidential decisions were escaping the rooms where they belonged. Charles had arranged the evening as a quiet family dinner, with no senior aides present. Clarence House, his London residence, was meant to offer privacy away from the formal machinery of the palace. Camilla welcomed William, Catherine, and Tom with the hope that one calm evening might soften old tensions. Instead, every person at the table carried a different fear into the room. William had recently attended a sealed meeting with the king and 2 senior advisors. A sealed meeting meant a restricted discussion whose contents were not to be shared beyond those officially included. They had examined changes to his future responsibilities, including authority over major household appointments and succession briefings, private meetings that prepare the monarchy for a future change of sovereign. Tom spoke during dessert as if the subject were harmless. He casually mentioned that William would soon control a new Crown Coordination Office, a planned unit designed to organize the heir's future duties and connect them with the king's household. The words landed with brutal force, because that proposal had never been announced outside the sealed discussion. William placed his glass down. "Who told you about the Crown Coordination Office?" he asked. Tom's confidence disappeared almost immediately. He looked toward Camilla before saying the information had simply come up in conversation. The Queen Consort reached for her water, but did not drink. Catherine watched Charles closely, waiting for him to intervene. The king lowered his eyes toward his plate and remained silent. That silence hurt William almost as deeply as the disclosure itself. He needed his father to protect the boundary, yet the monarch appeared trapped between confronting his wife and defending his heir. Camilla tried to change the subject, but Catherine recognized the shift in her husband's expression. Later, in a private recorded conversation, preserved by one of William's trusted aides, the princess warned him that silence would allow family closeness to weaken rules created to protect the crown. William ordered a review the following morning. A documented account showed that a summary of the sealed meeting had been sent to Camilla's office for scheduling reasons, even though she had not attended the discussion. One page had also been copied. No investigation identified who made it, but the prince immediately tightened access around future briefings. When Tom appeared backstage 3 months later, William did not see an innocent visitor. He saw Clarence House all over again. This time, he would not accept silence, and Camilla would not let him confront her son without fighting back. The corridor cleared, the doors closed, and two of the most powerful figures in the royal family finally confronted each other without ceremony to soften the blow. William accused Camilla of allowing personal loyalty to penetrate protected crown business. She accused him of using protocol to punish people he had never fully accepted. Charles stood between them, but even the king could not control what followed. Years of restrained suspicion erupted in a conversation neither side could take back. William asked Tom and the remaining aides to leave at once. The prince wanted the argument contained before more staff heard it, but Camilla refused to move. She said any accusation involving her son would be answered in her presence. Charles then led them into his private office, a room reserved for confidential work and personal discussions away from the wider royal household. The air changed the moment the door shut. William told the queen consort that Tom had now appeared twice near information he had no right to receive. Camilla answered that the future king had already judged her son guilty before asking why he had come. She believed he was treating suspicion as proof. William did not retreat. He said the monarchy could not be run like a family drawing room, where private affection decided who entered and who was trusted. Camilla stood so quickly that her chair moved behind her. She told him he had never understood what her children had endured while she gave her life to the crown. Charles listened as his wife and heir spoke across him. The king understood the wound beneath her anger, but he also knew William was defending a boundary that should never have become unclear. When the prince demanded accountability, the monarch slowly removed his signet ring, the personal seal used to mark royal authority, and placed it on the desk. William then produced the access schedule. It showed Tom's approved arrival during the private pre-briefing period, the restricted time before senior discussions began, not during the public reception planned later that day. He placed the page in front of Camilla and tapped the time with one finger. "This is not after the meeting," William said. "This is before the doors close." Camilla pushed the schedule back across the desk. Her voice shook, but her answer was firm. Then questioned the person who summoned him. "Do not condemn my son for arriving." Silence followed. The queen finally admitted that she knew Tom would be inside the palace, but she believed he was waiting to discuss a separate charitable event after the briefing. She had never approved his presence beside the secured entrance. William asked the final question. Who from her office had sent the instructions? Camilla hesitated, then named her principal private secretary, the senior aide trusted to manage her official schedule and personal arrangements. That answer changed the entire crisis. The danger no longer rested with one forbidden guest. It now led directly into the private office that had quietly expanded its influence around the king. Every palace door opens because someone has decided it should. Tom's backstage access had required a name on a list, a message to security, and an instruction strong enough to silence questions. William now followed that chain directly into Camilla's private office. What he discovered was more dangerous than a family misunderstanding. Staff members had begun treating the Queen's personal requests as if they carried the authority of the crown itself, and no one had dared define where her influence ended. Camilla's private office controlled far more than a diary. It managed her correspondence, charitable work, family arrangements, and contact with the king's household. The sovereign's office, meaning the official team serving Charles in his role as monarch, was supposed to approve any request touching restricted crown business. Yet over time, verbal instructions had started moving between departments without written confirmation. William saw the danger immediately. He told the Queen consort that entry near a crown briefing could only be approved by Charles, the Prince of Wales, or the designated senior secretary responsible for the meeting. Camilla argued that her staff had always handled practical arrangements without being treated as a threat. Charles remained silent for several seconds. The king knew his hesitation had helped create the confusion. By avoiding a direct boundary between his wife's office and his heir's authority, he had allowed both sides to believe their instructions carried final weight. The principal private secretary entered with an access order in his hand. His role made him Camilla's most senior administrative aide, trusted to turn her wishes into official arrangements. When William asked how Tom had passed security, the secretary placed his identification card on the table. His hands trembled. The answer was worse than anyone expected. He had used an internal priority code normally reserved for members of the royal household. That code told security officers not to delay the person named on the request. It did not place Tom inside the briefing, but it pushed him through the palace as though his presence had already been formally approved. Camilla demanded an explanation. The aide said Tom was meant to wait backstage so he could discuss a food and heritage initiative connected to a royal foundation immediately after the meeting. A royal foundation is a charitable organization supported by senior members of the family. He insisted he had acted for convenience, not influence. William asked whether Charles had approved the code. The secretary admitted he had never asked. He had assumed the Queen's verbal instruction was enough. Charles read the order twice, then set it down without speaking. William waited. Camilla's anger gave way to disbelief. Finally, the king drew a line through the priority code and said, "This authority should never have been used for a private arrangement." William suspended the code and ordered a full review. With one stroke of the monarch's pen, the hidden power behind the backstage invitation collapsed, and the people who had relied upon it began to feel the consequences. By evening, the cancellation had become more than an interrupted meeting. Security privileges were withdrawn, staff were suspended, schedules were rewritten, and Camilla's office was placed under review. Yet the most painful consequence unfolded away from the advisors. Tom realized his presence had weakened his mother, at the very moment she believed she was protecting him. Camilla, left alone after the officials departed, faced a truth she had resisted for years. The crown would never treat family access as harmless. William moved quickly. The prince suspended all unofficial backstage passes connected to private family appointments near crown meetings. Those passes had allowed approved guests to wait inside restricted areas without joining formal business. He also ordered the cancelled briefing to be rescheduled under tighter controls, because every unexplained entrance now threatened confidence in the future king's authority. Camilla's principal secretary was removed from access-related duties, while the review continued. The queen consort understood what that meant. Her office had not merely made a scheduling mistake. It had used royal authority without clear permission, and the damage now reached beyond one aide. Tom called his mother before the evening ended. He offered to issue a public explanation and accept responsibility for appearing backstage. Camilla refused. She knew one statement could turn an internal crisis into a national scandal, and make her son appear to be defending himself against an accusation the palace had not yet made. Tom met her privately soon afterward. He asked whether she had wanted him waiting near the briefing room. She admitted that she had approved a meeting with him afterward, but she had never intended him to become part of the crown discussion or stand beside its secured entrance. Tom placed his phone before Camilla. The message clearly read, "Arrive at 3:40. Wait beside the briefing entrance." She read it once, then again, before whispering, "That is not what I asked them to send." The timing changed everything. The secretary had claimed Tom was expected only after the briefing, yet the written instruction ordered him to arrive before it ended. Camilla realized someone had expanded her original request, turning a private family arrangement into an access breach. Her anger shifted away from William and toward the aide who had acted in her name. Tom watched his mother absorb the truth. He had wanted to protect her, but his presence had exposed the very weakness William feared. Camilla told him that good intentions did not erase consequences. He answered that silence would not clear either of them. Camilla sat alone after he left. She removed a family photograph from beside the official red boxes, the locked cases carrying government and royal papers, and held it as the office lights went dark. Only one path remained. Tom and William had to speak directly, without Camilla, Charles, advisors, or palace protocol between them. For the first time, they would meet not as rival branches of a divided family, but as two men whose names had been used in someone else's dangerous decision. There were no equerries in the room, no secretaries taking notes, and no queen or king to defend either side. William and Tom met alone the following morning. One was preparing to inherit the crown. The other had spent decades watching that institution reshape his family from the outside. Their conversation began with suspicion, but it did not remain there. For the first time, both men spoke openly about the resentment, fear, and assumptions that had carried them toward confrontation. Tom had requested the meeting himself. He told Camilla he could not allow her office to absorb the blame without explaining exactly what had happened. William agreed, but only on one condition. Neither man would speak for Charles or the Queen Consort. This would not be a palace negotiation. It would be a private reckoning. Tom began carefully. He admitted that he had often believed the prince saw him as an unwanted extension of his mother's influence. He had spent years close enough to feel the weight of royal life, yet far enough outside it to know he would never belong to the institution itself. William listened, then answered that the problem had never been family. It was access without limits. William also acknowledged the damage caused by the cancellation. He knew Tom had been humiliated in front of aides and pushed into a constitutional dispute, meaning a conflict involving the rules and authority of the monarchy. The future king did not apologize for stopping the briefing. He did, however, admit that a private man had been forced to carry the appearance of guilt before the facts were complete. Tom slid his phone across the table. "I came because I was told to come. I did not come for your meeting." William opened the full message chain. It showed Camilla's original request for a conversation after the briefing. A later instruction from her aide changed the time, moved the location, and told Tom to wait beside the secured entrance. The adjustment had been made for convenience, but it had transformed a family appointment into a breach of official protocol. William studied the messages, then pushed the phone gently back. "I believe you," he said, "but this can never happen again." Tom agreed without argument. He promised never again to accept informal access near Crown business, even when the invitation appeared authorized. William responded with a promise of his own. Future family meetings would be separated completely from constitutional events, with no backstage shortcuts and no blurred instructions. The tension did not disappear, but it changed. Suspicion gave way to clarity. Tom had not tried to enter the briefing or obtain its contents. The breach came from unauthorized administrative overreach, not a secret plan by Camilla's son. Their agreement gave Charles the evidence he needed to make a final decision. But beyond the palace walls, the cancelled briefing had already leaked, and the empty room was becoming the center of a public storm. By midday, one photograph had escaped the palace and transformed a private dispute into a national spectacle. It showed William leaving the briefing entrance alone, his folder closed beneath one arm, while Camilla stood several steps behind him, with Tom partly visible near the doorway. No argument could be heard, yet the distance between them told its own story. Newspapers rushed special editions into print, broadcasters interrupted programming, and the country began debating who truly controlled the boundaries of the modern crown. The palace issued only a narrow statement. Officials confirmed that the crown briefing had been postponed because of an internal access issue, but they refused to explain who had entered, who had approved it, or why William had cancelled the meeting. A crown briefing was a restricted discussion about royal duties, succession planning, security, and the future work of the monarchy. By saying so little, the household made the mystery feel even larger. Commentators divided almost immediately. Some argued that the prince had acted with necessary force, protecting a confidential process before trust could be damaged. Others asked whether Camilla's family had quietly received privileges that ordinary private citizens could never expect. Tom's name became part of a constitutional debate he had never chosen to enter. Outside Buckingham Palace, a crowd gathered beneath the balcony shortly after noon. One broadcaster stood before the gates and called the cancellation the moment the heir publicly drew a boundary around the crown. The phrase spread across evening programs, giving the crisis a meaning far beyond one backstage corridor. Camilla felt the photograph had turned her into the author of a plan she had never approved. The Queen Consort believed it made her appear to have forced her son toward royal authority. Tom felt something darker. His private connection to his mother was being treated as proof of political ambition, even after William had accepted that he never tried to enter the briefing. William refused demands for an immediate personal statement. The future king knew that defending himself too quickly could make the cancellation appear emotional rather than constitutional. Catherine sat beside him during the evening broadcast and watched the photograph return again and again. William lowered the volume when the image filled the screen. The princess reached for his hand and said, "They can misunderstand the moment. They cannot be allowed to misunderstand the rule." By morning, one national newspaper printed the photograph across its entire front page beneath the headline, "William closes the door." The image became the public verdict before Charles had spoken. The king prepared a formal household directive, a binding internal order setting rules for royal staff and access. It would confirm that no extended family member could enter restricted crown areas without written approval. The public had chosen its image. The newspapers had chosen their verdict. Now Charles had to decide whether this crisis would end in permanent division or disciplined reconciliation. The crisis ended not with another confrontation, but with a written rule and 4 private acknowledgments. Charles accepted that blurred authority had developed under his watch. Camilla accepted that protecting her son required keeping him away from official crown machinery. Tom accepted that family closeness could never equal royal access. And William accepted that defending the monarchy did not require treating every mistake as betrayal. The cancelled briefing became painful, but it also became the moment the institution finally defined its boundaries. Charles issued a binding household directive. The order stated that only working royals, authorized officials, and individually approved specialists could enter restricted areas connected to crown briefings. A household directive was an internal royal instruction that staff were required to follow. The king also confirmed William's authority to suspend or cancel any succession-related meeting whenever security, confidentiality, or constitutional boundaries were in doubt. Camilla met William privately soon afterward. The Queen Consort acknowledged that Tom should never have been placed backstage. She did not apologize for loving her son or defending him, but she accepted that her office had confused family convenience with institutional permission. The prince listened without interruption before telling her that he had never intended to diminish Tom personally. His decision had protected the meeting. It had not been designed to punish her family. The internal review delivered its final finding through a documented report. Camilla's principal secretary had changed Tom's arrival time independently, believing he was making 2 appointments run more smoothly. He had not attempted to leak information, but he had used authority that was never his to exercise. Charles permanently removed him from access control duties. Tom later sent William a brief, handwritten note. He thanked the future king for reading the complete message chain and hearing his explanation. The prince placed the note inside the reviewed file, instead of throwing it away. That small decision carried weight. Accountability had been enforced, but resentment would not be allowed to become permanent. 3 days later, the crown briefing resumed. Tom was not present. Camilla's family meeting took place at a separate residence, and every official attendee entered through the approved security process. Before the discussion began, Charles looked toward William. The king gave a single nod, and his son opened the folder. Across the palace, Camilla sat with Tom over a private lunch, far from secured doors and constitutional papers. The separation no longer felt like punishment. It felt like protection. The door William closed was not a rejection of family. It was a final declaration that affection, loyalty, and authority could not occupy the same unguarded space. The monarchy survived because each person finally accepted where love ended and duty began. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.